Japanese professionals as young as 20 years old up to 69 years of age share their expertise in specific development fields. In the Philippines, JICA partners with local institutions in the dispatch of Japanese volunteers throughout the country. Japanese volunteers live with the communities, learn their language, and promote international cooperation through their volunteer work. The share their expertise despite its natural beauty as an archipelago. In the Philippines, is prone to natural disasters with local located on the Pacific Ring of Fire. Japanese the country is prone to tropical cyclones. Japanese volunteers live with the communities, all learn their language, and promote international cooperation through the Japanese volunteers to help the Philippines by being there for the most vulnerable through training, sharing Japan's experiences and to know how in disaster management. The country is prone to tropical cyclones. Japanese volunteers can live with the communities, all learn their language and promote international cooperation.
Same as Japan. My activity is about ambulance. Pamplona bought a new ambulance car, so I will support conduct training about basic skill and knowledge about ambulance. And second is about fire. Japanese donated fire truck, but no one knows how to operate the fire truck, so I will support it.
The role of Ms. Natsuko Kitamura in our DRR activities is to support it. She has been walking an extra mile in every activity that we are conducting, and she has taught us so many skills and knowledge.
I'm Natsuko Kitamura. I'm a JICA volunteer.
As a JICA volunteer, I support in making the Emergency Operations Center manual and in conducting training like basic life support, rope rescue, and water rescue. Filipinos are always cheerful. During training activities, it is important to make the environment relaxed so that learning is easy. As JICA volunteers, it is important to build relationship with the people we work with. Always smile and be friendly.
By running a similar to 911 system, this system is being run here under the Tactical Emergency Operations Center, and this is where our JICA volunteer, Sergeant Kazuyoshi Naito, comes into focus. He assisted us conducting or formulating a guidebook for the Tactical Emergency Operations Center.
My name is Kazuyoshi Naito. I'm a JICA volunteer.
As a JICA volunteer, I mainly do disaster awareness education in school and barangays. I'm also teach them how to prepare emergency items using local materials. Of course, as a JICA volunteer, we should achieve my goal. But its more priority is build relationship with other local people.
Every day, the municipality is being confronted by a number of natural and man-made hazards. One of that is the storm surge from 12 coastal communities, landslides, and sea level rise. Out of the 4 thematic areas of disaster management, 2 areas for which we need our volunteers are on disaster preparedness and disaster prevention and mitigation.
I am Naoaki Tsunoda. I am JICA volunteer.
The JICA volunteer program is testament to Japan's long-standing friendship with the Filipinos. A recipient of the Magsaysay Award in 2016, the Asia's Nobel Peace Prize equivalent, the Japanese volunteers, then until today, work together with communities in changing lives. Japanese professionals as young as 20.
This is the School of Social Sciences of the Ateneo de Manila University. The School of Social Sciences, or SOS, is home to some of Ateneo's most in-demand degree courses, making SOS the largest of the 5 Loyola schools in terms of student population, faculty members, degree programs, academic departments, and research centers. Our faculty, researchers, and students help fulfill the university's mission by addressing the complex questions of our time, such as, how do we create a prosperous society that benefits all? How do we address the major challenges to democracy? How do we transform social structures and relations of power? What constitutes human thriving across different populations and domains? How do we meet human needs while considering the planet's limits? Can our history of adaptability and ingenuity strengthen us? Here, our students learn to connect individuals and groups in new ways and help make institutions and systems fulfill their mission in society. They learn to address social inequalities and promote social justice as professionals for and with others. When you study in SOS, you will be equipped with analytical and practical skills for a variety of work settings, such as archival, qualitative, and ethnographic research, quantitative analysis and modeling, communication, clinical and social interventions. We promote a way of doing the social sciences that is anchored on interdisciplinary and transdisciplinary practices, local and global realities, critical thinking and problem solving, which cover deep time, historical, and contemporary periods. The School of Social Sciences offers undergraduate and graduate training, as well as short courses and diploma programs. This academic and professional training is enriched by partnerships with organizations and institutions in the Philippines and overseas. These partnerships bridge science and practice, academe and profession, and the university and the public. Our alumni include national leaders and practitioners who embody the Ignatian values of magis, cura personalis, discernment, and service rooted in justice and love. In SOS, we impart new thinking and skills for the complex questions and challenges of today's world. Come and join us at the Ateneo School of Social Sciences.
Good afternoon, everyone. Minasang konnichiwa. Maayong hapon sa tanan. On behalf of Ateneo de Manila University's Japanese Studies program from the School of Social Sciences, Coastal Cities at Risk Philippines, and the Japan International Cooperation Agency, I would like to welcome you to the 5th JICA Chair Lecture titled Japan's Experiences and Strategies for Disaster Risk Reduction and Resilience. I am Christine Michelle Santos from Ateneo's Japanese Studies program. I will be your moderator this afternoon. It is an honor to moderate this very timely lecture after we have felt the brunt of the weather these last few days. I hope that this afternoon's lecture can inspire us to seek solutions to our problems concerning resilience and national disasters. This afternoon's lecture is part of JICA's Development Studies Program, or JICA DSP, which JICA launched in 2018 in cooperation with various universities in Japan with an aim to develop future leaders of developing countries. This program offers an opportunity to study the respective academic fields at Japanese graduate schools and Japanese studies that explores Japan's modernization and development cooperation experiences in light of its historical and cultural background. In order to expand the opportunities of such Japanese studies in partner countries as well, JICA has started the JICA Chair or JICA Program for Japanese Studies in collaboration with leading universities in our partner countries. Under JICA Chair, short intensive lectures about various topics about Japan in the field of politics, economics, public administration, and law, among others, are conducted by lecturers dispatched from Japan. JICA can also provide reference materials for Japanese studies scholars in research and education opportunities to faculty members of universities who wish to establish or strengthen courses or programs of Japanese studies. In the Philippines, JICA has partnered with Ateneo de Manila University Japanese Studies program for the conduct of the JICA Chair Lecture Series. The Japanese Studies program of Ateneo, which was established in 1966, is the first and one of the most established Japanese studies program in Southeast Asia. So far, 4 JICA Chair Lecture Series were already conducted, wherein participants from several universities and counterpart agencies were invited in order to introduce the JICA Chair program and to share lessons from Japan's modernization to more students and development workers. For the 5th JICA Chair Lecture Series, JICA and Ateneo have decided on a topic, Japan's experiences and strategies for disaster risk reduction and resilience, that will give a glimpse on Japan's history of disasters, evolution of policies, local support for DRR, and awareness raising, and what are the preparation pre-disaster investments implemented by Japan to reduce impact of future major disasters and enjoy rapid economic growth. This afternoon, Professor Satoru Nishikawa from Tohoku University and JICA Senior Advisor on Disaster Reduction Strategy will provide a lecture on Japan's experiences, challenges, and lessons learned when it comes to disaster risk reduction, mitigation, and resilience. After the lecture, we will have 2 discussants, Assistant Secretary Bernardo Rafaelito Alejandro from the Office of Civil Defense, and Dr. Emma Porio, Project Leader of the Ateneo Coastal Cities at Risk Project on Disaster Resilience, who will focus on localizing the experiences and lessons on DRRM and how the government can further improve these strategies. After the lecture, we look forward to a fruitful discussion with you. I think many have gone online because of the weather today, but we're also opening the floor to those who are here on site. In order for us to have a fruitful discussion and understanding of Japan's and Philippines' experiences on DRRM and measures that have been taken so far. Before we begin our main program, we would like to give a couple of reminders for our online and on-site participants. Oops, sorry. For our online participants, please use the following Q&A form that can be accessed via this QR code or through bit.ly 5th JICA Lecture Q&A. Your questions will be read after the panel discussion. For our on-site participants, please do not forget to confirm your attendance at our registration table. We have attendance sheets which we hope you fill and submit at the registration table at the end of the event. Similar to our online attendees, please hold your questions until I open the floor for questions during the open forum. With this in mind, I welcome you to the 5th JICA Lecture. Before we hear from Professor Nishikawa, we'd like to call Father Roberto Yap, S.J., University President of Ateneo de Manila University, for his opening remarks.
Ambassador Endo Kazuya, Ambassador of Japan to the Philippines, Mr. Sakamoto Takema, Chief Representative of JICA Philippines Office, Dr. Nishikawa Saturo, Professor, Tohoku University, JICA Senior Advisor on Disaster Reduction Strategy, Assistant Secretary Bernardo Alejandro, Deputy Administrator for Administration and Education of the Office of Civil Defense, Dr. Emma Porio, Professor of Ateneo de Manila University, colleagues in the Ateneo, ladies and gentlemen, those on-site and online, welcome to this 5th JICA lecture. Good afternoon, and I thank you very much for those who are here for braving the rain. But it's a good experience because our very topic is disaster management, disaster risk. On behalf of Ateneo de Manila University, I welcome you to the 5th JICA Chair Lecture series. Let me start by stating some figures. The United Nations found that from 1970 to 2019, 91% of deaths from weather, climate, and water hazards happened in developing countries. Carbon dioxide is the most common greenhouse gas emitted, contributing to 75% of climate warming pollution. According to a projection by the United Nations Office for Disaster Risk Reduction, the world will encounter 560 disasters annually by 2030. These figures are not mere statistics, but urgent calls to action. The time to act is now, and we must not delay. Every year, we witness the devastating impact of extreme weather events which cause infrastructure damage and affect millions, especially those burdened by poverty. The stark reality is that disasters are becoming more frequent, more intense, and widespread. So the theme of this year's JICA lecture, Disaster Risk Strategies, is relevant and timely, especially in the Philippines, which according to the UN is among the most vulnerable countries to climate-related events. We are honored to have Professor Satoru Nishikawa from Tohoku University with us today. We also thank our discussants, ASEC Bernardo Alejandro and Dr. Emma Porio. We look forward to gaining new insights from their knowledge and experience. The 2023 UN Global Assessment Report on Disaster Risk Reduction notes that disasters undermine global development. As disasters increase, so do humanitarian needs, undoing the gains made in economic growth and development. The UN report stresses that to achieve the Sustainable Development Goals, it is important to appraise the overall impact on the 3 Ps: people, planet, and prosperity. Protecting our planet to ensure prosperity falls upon us, the people inhabiting the earth. We must protect our common home as the climate changes and challenges us. In the words of Pope Francis, we must never forget that natural environment is a collective good, the patrimony of all humanity and the responsibility of everyone. As stewards of the earth, we are not just bystanders in this crisis. We are active participants who are responsible for our actions. Ateneo de Manila is committed to caring and collaborating with others to protect and renew our common home and all of God's creation. We have made integral ecology a strategic priority, along with our dedication to becoming a Laudato Si university. We continue creating, implementing, and monitoring programs and activities and other initiatives that anchor on the 3 E's of sustainability: environmental protection, economic development, and social equity. Each of us, regardless of our age, gender, ethnicity, and religion, needs to do our part in averting the worst impacts of climate change. We are still our best hope in creating a better future for all, and your presence here today is a testament to that. Your active participation in this lecture series is appreciated and essential to its success. I urge you to engage fully and contribute to the collective understanding and problem-solving of these environmental and ecological challenges. I wish you a fruitful discussion. Thank you, and again, a wonderful afternoon to all.
Thank you very much, Father Bobby. We would now like to call Ambassador Endo Kazuya from the Embassy of Japan for his welcome remarks.
Assistant Secretary Noraline Ui, Department of Environmental and Natural Resources, Assistant Secretary Bernardo Rafaelito Alejandro, Deputy Administrator for Administration and Education Office of Civil Defense, Father Roberto Yap, President of Ateneo de Manila, and members of academia, Mr. Sakamoto Takema, Chief Representative of JICA Philippines Office, Dr. Nishikawa Satoru, JICA Senior Advisor on Disaster Reduction Strategy, and Professor, Tohoku University. Dr. Emma Porio, Professor, Ateneo de Manila University, distinguished guests and dear students. Ladies and gentlemen, good afternoon. Magandang hapon po sa inyong lahat. It is my great pleasure and honor to be here with you all for the 5th JICA Chair Lecture Series. As the JICA Chair project has been initiated and promoted by my mentor and friend, our former JICA President, Professor Kitaoka Shinichi, for many years. At the outset, I would like to express my deepest condolences to those who have lost their lives in the wake of Typhoon Karina and the recent tropical storm Ateneo. My heartfelt sympathy goes to all those affected. Such catastrophes are closely related to today's theme of Japan's experiences and strategies for disaster risk reduction and resilience. It is well known that it is not only the Philippines that is hit by typhoons during this season, but also Japan. In the face of such uncontrollable forces, I believe we share a goal to improve preparedness in responding effectively to disasters and mitigating their impacts. Indeed, the uncertainty and universality of natural catastrophes is a growing threat, and climate change only makes them more perilous. It is imperative that we identify ways to reduce their detrimental effects and continue to build on readily available knowledge to anticipate the ravages these calamities bring. As disasters can take thousands of lives and livelihoods in their wake, the Japanese government continuously strives to advance the country's disaster management plans. Over the years, Japan has also realized numerous cooperations with its partner countries and organizations. Those collaborations have aimed to strengthen the resilience of developing countries against disasters and in turn promote stable socio-economic development and human security. Without resilience against catastrophes, nations that have worked so hard to achieve economic growth may have it easily toppled. In addition, Japan has long worked to strengthen the framework for the international cooperation in this field. The Sendai Framework for Disaster Risk Reduction, for instance, was established to better formulate and guide actions in addressing disasters under the auspices of the United Nations. With the knowledge derived from its experiences, Japan remains eager to share its expertise with other nations as we continue to weather such storms together. In the Philippines, Japan has long provided support in a wide range of areas, especially in infrastructure development, through official development assistance for more than 50 years since 1968. Japan's support includes flood management, road construction and improvement, support to forecasting and warning systems, improved access to water and sanitation, training programs boosting human resources development and post-disaster standby loans. In the aftermath of Typhoon Yolanda in 2013, Japan delivered emergency relief supplies and implemented an emergency disaster recovery and reconstruction assistance project. Japan has also been implementing flood control measures for the Pasig Marikina River for over 20 years and remains committed in assisting the Philippines in its disaster risk reduction agenda. I'm heartened to see learning sessions such as the JICA Chair help young people see the importance of addressing highly relevant issues. I hope to count on our students today to develop a greater consciousness in tackling these challenges and to work tirelessly towards the development of your nation. With focus and perseverance, you have the potential to bring about greater advancement and development of your country, undeterred in the face of disasters and calamities. I hope today's JICA Chair session will provide our audience with invaluable insights towards a resilient and adaptable Philippines. Thank you very much. Maraming salamat po at mabuhay.
Thank you very much, Ambassador Endo. Now we would like to hear another welcome note from Assistant Secretary Dr. Noraline M. Uy from the Department of Environment and Natural Resources.
Father Roberto Yap, SJ, Ambassador Endo Kazuya, Professor Nishikawa Satoru, Asek Rafi Alejandro, Dr. Emma Porio, colleagues from the JICA Philippine Office and Ateneo de Manila University, good afternoon. On behalf of the Secretary of the Department of Environment and Natural Resources, allow me to read her remarks. It is an honor to be part of the 5th JICA Chair Lecture series, where we share knowledge and strategies in disaster risk reduction and management. Today, as we focus on Japan's experiences, we are reminded of the enduring resilience of a nation that has consistently turned challenges into opportunities for growth and learning. Japan's journey through modernization and development offers invaluable lessons that can surely guide our efforts here in the Philippines. Disasters know no borders. In the Philippines, we are acutely aware of the risks posed by our unique geographic location, from typhoons to floods, earthquakes, oil spills, and volcanic eruptions. Our country faces numerous natural hazards. At the Department of Environment and Natural Resources, we have taken significant steps and engaged with other government agencies, NGOs, the academe, and the private sector for a whole society collaboration toward mitigating and managing these risks. Science informs our strategies, but it is our unity and collective strength that will drive their success. As we work together towards a green footprint, we recognize that local leaders must go beyond traditional policy domains. Access to safe, affordable housing, health, education, social protection, and livelihood are all critical components of climate resilience. We believe that by working together, both within our borders and with international partners like JICA, we can build a safer, more resilient future for all. Before I close, allow me to invite everyone to the Philippine hosting of the Asia-Pacific Ministerial Conference on Disaster Risk Reduction on October 14 to 18 at the Philippine International Convention Center. Our JICA colleagues and Nishikawa Sensei, I hope, will also be speaking at the conference. Thank you, and I look forward to the fruitful discussions that will emerge from the important series. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Assistant Secretary Uy. Now, before we begin our discussion, I would now like to invite Father Robbie Yap, Ambassador Endo, our speakers, panelists, and JICA Chief Representative Sakamoto Takema for a quick photo before we begin our lecture. We would like to ask people in the audience to please sit closer as we take a photo of the event. All right, with all of the photos done, well, actually, in terms of attendance, we have over 160 students already. Actually, not just students, but also researchers and members of the government who are also attending online. So now, it is my honor to introduce our speaker this afternoon, Professor Nishikawa Satoru. Dr. Nishikawa has extensive experience in disaster reduction, humanitarian affairs, and infrastructure planning. He holds a master's degree in regional science and a PhD in risk analysis. After 36 years of experience in the Japanese government, he joined Nagoya University's Disaster Mitigation Research Center in 2018 and is a professor at Tohoku University. Lastly, he's also the Senior Advisor for Disaster Reduction Strategy at JICA. On that note, let us welcome Professor Nishikawa Satoru.
Good afternoon, and it's my great honor and pleasure to be here today. So let us start right away into the presentations. Okay, so this is the topic today. Mother Nature is not gentle in Japan. Approximately 18% of all the major earthquakes on the earth happen on the small Japanese archipelago. Mother Nature is not gentle in the Philippines as well. You have so many very violent volcanic eruptions. The two countries share the same kind of natural disasters. The only exception is snow avalanches. That is the reason that there is a need for the two countries to share the experiences. Please take a look at these two tables. The list on the left is the list of strong earthquakes. The list on the right is the list of deadly earthquakes. And if you compare the two, you will notice that the two are quite different. The third one, the Indonesia-Sumatra earthquake, which generated the great Indian Ocean tsunami, was the third strongest and the third deadliest, but the others are quite different. An earthquake in a no man's desert is not a disaster. A typhoon dissipating over the ocean is not a disaster. It's just an abnormal phenomenon. But if it hits a vulnerable community, it turns into a disaster. Even with modern science, we cannot stop earthquakes, we cannot stop typhoons. But by improving the societal conditions or by decreasing the social vulnerability, we would be able to substantially reduce disasters. And that is what disaster reduction is about. And it's usually said that there are 4 phases of disaster reduction, starting with prevention mitigation, then preparedness, and if something happens, first response, and then recovery and reconstruction, or build back better. Now, there is a need for some money or some cash to deal with disasters. Now, which do you prefer? Either to borrow money beforehand for seismic retrofitting, or to buy insurance, and after a collapse of an apartment, there would be funerals, and after that, you get insurance. My question is, will the family members who lost their beloved ones be happy with the insurance money afterwards? And I prefer the left. And that is what prior investment is about. Now, the question is, how can we take action before? We can take preventive action based on past experiences by understanding the history of disasters. And to do this, disaster records and statistics must be archived, and the lessons learned must be disseminated. We have modern science. We can take preventive action on appreciation of risk by understanding the scientific mechanism of hazard, and also the risk assessment with consideration of societal conditions. And the results of these risk assessments must be disseminated, understood, and be acted on. To do all of these, culture of prevention must prevail to encourage action for safety and resilience. Japan has a long tradition of coping with disasters. The oldest written record of an earthquake dates back to year 418. The oldest written record of a tsunami dates back to year 684. So Because of this history, it's said that the most dreadful things in Japan for children are earthquakes, lightning and thunder, fire, and father. The fourth one is no longer applicable, but this represents how the Japanese have feared disasters. In the 7th to the 8th century, it was said that the most respected Buddhist priest was the best civil engineer. There was a famous priest named Gyoki. He made earth dams in the western part of Japan. So many earth dams for irrigation and for flood control. In the 16th century, it was said that the Lord who controls the river is the ruler of the land. There was a famous warlord named Takeda Shingen, and his main territory was the Kofu Basin, where so many torrents poured together. And in these days, we did not have concrete in Japan. Only soil was the only construction material for making river dikes. So what he did, he intentionally cut the river dikes so that in case of very violent flooding, the floodwaters would gently overspill along the riverbed. And he intentionally placed rice paddies along the riverbed so that the rice paddies would act as if they were retarding ponds. The crop of rice, even if they are inundated for 1 or 2 days, they would not perish. That's the nature of rice. So by combining these, he was able to control the damage from the flooding. And this technique is still used in modern Japan in the midstreams to control the damage. Now, those renowned Japanese priests and lords, why were they dedicated to disaster reduction? By introducing the flood control and irrigation technology, there would be more rice produce. And then that would lead to stability of the livelihoods of the locals and trust and fellowship by the locals. Then they would be able to expand their areas of influence. We have volcanoes in Japan. We have earthquakes. This is a traditional ukiyo-e drawing, which was drawn right after the October Ansei Edo earthquake. Edo is the old name of Tokyo. And in this picture, you see that the ordinary citizens of Tokyo are trying to beat the legendary monster catfish, which was believed to cause earthquakes. In these days, we were not aware of active faults. The Japanese thought that the monster catfish underground is the cause of the earthquake. Right now, we know that it's active faults. Modern Japan is still full of tragedies and lessons learned. In 1896, the northern Pacific shores of Japan was menaced by a great tsunami. Back in 1923, Tokyo and Yokohama was totally destroyed by the great counter-earthquake. Please take a look at this statistics. This shows the number of casualties by natural disasters between 1945 and 2015. And I think you can see a clear changes in the past 70 years. Every year, Japan is hit by very strong typhoons. And especially in the 1940s and 50s, these were terrible days. Every time a major typhoon came, we lost maybe 1,000 or 2,000 casualties. And in 1947, half of Tokyo was totally inundated by the flooding from Kathleen typhoon. And it resulted in approximately 2,000 casualties. The eastern half of Tokyo was totally inundated and destroyed. And this was a wake-up call for flood protection of metropolitan areas in Japan. And this was a big damage because capital Tokyo, half of capital Tokyo was destroyed. And this was really a big controversy in the Japanese government. How should the Japanese government deal with such enormous flooding? There was a discussion, and in 2 years, the Ministry of Construction came up with a policy to control the 10 major rivers in Japan. Also, it came up with a master plan for flood control of the big Tone River, which flows into the areas surrounding Tokyo. A big multi-purpose dam in the upstream of the Tone River was constructed, and it is one of the biggest dams in Japan with a multi-purpose of water resource supply and flood control and hydroelectricity. Also in the midstreams, an anti-flood retarding pond was constructed. But in 1959, the third largest metropolitan area in Japan, Nagoya, was directly hit by a very strong typhoon. The lowest pressure was 894 hectopascals. The maximum wind speed was 75 meters per second. And as a result, more than 5,000 people were killed by this typhoon. Now, this was a big shock because prior to this typhoon, well, unfortunately, when a major typhoon came, we lost maybe 1,000 or 2,000 people. But this typhoon took away more than 5,000 casualties. And also, not only the human casualties, 4.2% of the GDP of Japan was immediately lost by this typhoon. So this damage caused a big discussion in the Japanese parliament. How should the Japanese government deal with disasters? And after 2 years of very heated discussions in the Japanese parliament, a new Disaster Countermeasures Basic Act was formulated in 1961. And it called for a change of the attitude from a response-oriented approach to a preventive approach. Also, there was a big discussion on which ministry should be in charge of disasters. And as a result, the conclusion is disaster reduction requires a multi-sectoral approach. So change an individual approach to a more comprehensive multi-sectoral approach. Also, it called for investment for disaster reduction. Also, the three layers of the government, the national government, the prefecture government, and the municipal governments were all given responsibilities. Also, on this occasion, the 1st of September was designated as the National Disaster Prevention Day. 1st of September is the day Tokyo was destroyed by the Great Kanto earthquake. And thanks to these efforts, we had great success in decreasing the casualties from typhoons and floods. The 1961 Act formulated the Japanese National Platform for Disaster Reduction, with having all the line ministries, and not only the government, including the sciences, and also having the access to the people through the local government, the mass media, and the NGOs. And this is the first national platform in the world for disaster reduction. And this became the model after the Hyungo Framework for Action in 2005. You may know that Mount Fuji is the most highest and the most beautiful mountain in Japan. Because of its beauty, it was worshipped as a god in the traditional Japanese culture. But by the bad experience of the Ismon typhoon, Japan Meteorological Agency made a good argument that instead of worshipping that mountain as a god, let's mount a meteorological radar on top of it. And they were successful. And this is the first high mountain radar in the world for typhoon tracking. And this was quite efficiently in upgrading the preciseness of the typhoon predictions. Now, with these experiences, now we have been working with the Philippines for the upgrading of the meteorological observation capacities and the preciseness of the meteorological predictions. And this is one example of our cooperation with the Philippines. From 1945 to 1985, Japan experienced a big population growth. Population growth means demand for housing, demand for water, demand for food, demand for electricity, demand for transportation. Now, in order to meet these demands, there was a need for enormous infrastructure investments, especially because Japan does not produce petroleum. We need energy, and we needed water. So, flood control, hydroelectricity, and water resource management was one of the very basic keys for social stability of Japan. Also, the demand for housing, demand for agricultural farmlands, and demand for industrial complexes. That means demand for deformation of land. But if these deformation of land are done carelessly, that would automatically lead to the risk of landslides. Please take a careful look at this picture. I think you will notice something weird in this picture. The surface of the river is higher than the road and the surrounding residential areas. This is a picture of downtown Tokyo. Now, why does this happen? Because there was a need for fresh water. There was so much pumping of groundwater from the wells. And Tokyo is sitting on a soft sediment soil of the Tone River. And by the water pumping, the ground is compacted and subsided. But we want to keep the rivers in its place. So as a result, we have these very queer picture. But imagine, if there is to be a crack in that wall, it's already a big disaster, and we have to avoid this. Japanese cities faced other risks as well. Because of the enormous population growth, there was so much densely disorderly towns like that. Also, right next to the river, there were housing developments. Back in 1974, the Tama River in Tokyo was flooded, and the newly built houses right next to the riverbed, they were washed away. So, disaster reduction is a must for city planning and regional development in Japan. So many cities made ordinances and tried to make redevelopment plans and also land readjustment plans to make the cities in a better environment. Also, there was much attention paid to controlling water in the cities. In order to avoid further subsidence of the ground, a big ban on drilling wells were implemented. Also, when the new construction of residential areas were done, there was a must for making retarding basins to avoid flash floods and to make new efforts to seep the rainwater into the ground to avoid flash flooding. Now, with these experiences, Japan has a cooperative project with the Philippines addressing the issues of Metro Manila. We have worked on floodways and tried to make Manila better regarding the flooding. And this has been regarded as one of the major accomplishments of the cooperation between the Philippines and Japan. And it is still an ongoing project comprising of various phases. And now we are working on the phase 4 and 5. And if these are completed, there would be less flooding in the Metro Manila area. Already back in 2020, Manila was hit by the Ulysses typhoon. And thanks to these projects, the number of, I would say, the losses have greatly decreased thanks to these efforts. But it's still an ongoing process. And I guess we need further progress in this regard. Now let's turn the topic to earthquakes. We have so many earthquakes in Japan. This is a list of the major earthquakes between 1945 and 1995. And the earthquakes which are marked in red are the ones who have changed the Japanese structural standards. This is a Fukui earthquake in 1948. This is the Tokachi-oki earthquake in 1968. And this is the Miyagi-ken-oki earthquake in 1978. And as you can see, we had so many housing collapse, building damages. And every time these major earthquakes came, Japan revised or formulated the building standards, especially the 1978 and the 1968 earthquakes were the ones which made a big difference. And in 1981, the Japanese building standard was largely revised. Now, all the countries in the world with earthquakes, they have their building codes. But having a building code and whether that building code is practiced or not is something different. Well, in Japan, fortunately, our predecessors made a big invention. Back in 1950, there was a new public corporation called the Government Housing Loan Corporation. And it provides special low-interest loans to houses which are built according to the building standard. In the 1950s, Japan's houses were in very bad quality. They were weak against fires, weak against earthquakes, and in these days, tuberculosis was a big health issue in Japan. So there had to be better sunshine and ventilation. So housing was a major source of social problems in Japan. So our predecessors made a good invention that if somebody wants to borrow a special low-interest loan, they have to submit their building plans and be checked that it's according to the building standard, and they have to get an intermediate inspection and the final inspection. And if these three meet the building standard, they would be eligible for a special low-interest loan. And that was a good incentive for the housing market to follow the building standard. Because if a real estate developer wants to sell a condominium, that company would automatically follow the building code and sell to the potential consumer that this is applicable regarding the special low interest loan. So by having the seismic building standard and the policy incentive, the housing market makes the building standard to be observed. But regardless of these efforts, in 1995, Kobe was destroyed by a big earthquake. Many of the old houses built before the 1981 standard collapsed. Many of the reinforced concrete condominiums, they collapsed. And that was a big cause of the death. Please take a careful look at these two pictures. This is a Kobe Municipal Government Headquarters. The low-rise building in the front is the old building. The high-rise building is the new one, and you can see the clear difference. The first lesson from this earthquake is the collapse of the houses and buildings was the direct cause of death. In Japan, there is always a Surgeon General's autopsy regarding death by disasters. And the Surgeon General's autopsy revealed that 83% of the casualties died within 15 minutes from the earthquakes. So that means that no matter how quick the search and rescue teams rush to the affected sites, it's impossible to save their lives. The only solution is to ensure building safety. The Kobe City Hall was destroyed, and that paralyzed the operation of the Kobe municipal government. The Hyogo prefecture government, their building was slightly damaged, but as you can see from this picture, they had enormous difficulty in communications. So the second lesson is the delay of the first response due to the lack of information and the paralysis of the local municipal government headquarters. So after this earthquake, the number of seismometers in Japan, prior to that earthquake, we had 150 seismic observation stations. Now we have approximately 4,400, so that we can immediately locate where are the most deadly places are. But I would say the biggest lesson is the lack of earthquake awareness in Kobe and Hyogo. Now, on this map, you see the red figures. These are the number of the major earthquakes which were felt between 1984 and 1994. And in 10 years, Tokyo had 257. That means that in average, if you live in Tokyo, you feel an earthquake twice a month. In Sendai or Miyagi, it's 42. That means that every 3 months you feel an earthquake. But in Hyogo, it was only 7. So it's natural, or human beings feel that if you don't feel an earthquake, you will naturally think that you will not experience earthquakes in the future. However, the scientists or the geophysics scientists have already identified 2 major active faults in Hyogo. And this was published on the scientific papers, and the scientists have written that there is a risk of huge earthquakes along these active faults. But that was totally paid no attention by the Kobe or the Hyogo authorities, nor the citizens. 10 years after the earthquake, a major director in the Hyogo prefecture government honestly confessed that they were totally unaware of the risk. The lack of earthquake awareness meant lack of preventive measures and preparedness, which led to human sufferings and slow response. Now, there was a big paradigm shift after this earthquake, and there was a call for nationwide movement for disaster reduction action by combining the self-help action by individuals, families, and companies, mutual help action at neighborhoods and local communities, and a good public action by the governments. I was appointed the director for disaster preparedness in the cabinet office back in 2004, and I was asked to make a concrete program to provide and promote this nationwide movement. So I tried to approach various, I'll say, non-traditional players to be involved in disaster reduction. I approached the Parents and Teachers Association by asking the question, you must be concerned about your children's safety. They said yes, but their idea of children's safety was transportation accidents. And I said to them, why don't you expand that idea to include disasters? And they said yes. I approached the consumer cooperative unions. They are concerned about consumer safety against accidents or electrification. But I said to them, why don't you expand that idea to include disasters, especially earthquake as well? And they said yes. And I tried to approach various sectors. I'm sure that you know that we Japanese are good at making good animes and mangas. So I approached a famous manga cartoonist, asking him, please make a good manga so that it would attract young people's attention. So he came up with a very good piece. The title is, How Can You Save Your Girlfriend When an Earthquake Hits When You Are Dating? This one. And this was very good. Also, I approached a movie producer to make a joint poster on earthquake awareness. And this is a movie regarding a shop owner whose shop was totally destroyed and his shopping arcade was totally burnt down by the Kobe earthquake. And he stood up for recovery of his shop and his shopping arcade. And he was successful. And this is a movie. And it said on this poster, disasters may suddenly hit you, but you still have time to prepare now. Your awareness and preparedness will save you. Now, the private sector has a big role to play. If the public at large appreciate the added value of safety and resilience and understand the science behind the scenes, the additional expenditures for risk reduction would be regarded as investment for added value. Now, the consumer's awareness changes the advertisement of a condominium. This is a typical advertisement of a condominium in Kobe. And it says that this condominium has 4 good attractive points. And one of them is that this condominium has seismic base isolation. Also, we try to involve the businesses to participate in disaster reduction. Back in 1991, I was the main author of the annual government report on disaster reduction. And I raised the point about the need to involve the private sector. And in 2005, when I came back to the cabinet office, I wrote the Japanese BCP guideline for the businesses. And we tried best to propagate this idea. And we made a special low-interest loan by a government-affiliated bank to the major businesses that if they are eager about disaster reduction, they would be eligible for a special low-interest loan. Also, for the small businesses, the Tokyo Metropolitan Government, together with the local credit union, made a special loan for the small businesses. And thanks to these efforts, the ratio of companies having the BCPs have greatly increased from 2007 to 2023. The Japanese BCP was tested in the case of the 2011 Great East Japan earthquake and tsunami. On the left, you see a familiar convenience store. Their shops were totally destroyed by the tsunami, but they immediately mobilized the mobile truck shops to go to the affected area. On the right is a medical recycling company. Their main factory was totally destroyed. And nowadays, hospitals cannot just throw away the medical waste. But this company's president had an agreement with a similar company in Yamagata, which is 50 kilometers away. And there was a treaty among them. If one of their companies are in trouble, the other will help. 2 days after the earthquake, the company collected the medical waste from the Sendai hospitals and handed to the Yamagata company to take care of it. So as a result, the Sendai hospitals had no problem with medical waste treatment. In 2004, there was a big earthquake in Niigata, and I was the on-site coordinator of the government. And when I was working in the Niigata prefecture headquarters, I was really confused by this expression. Niigata prefecture is a place without earthquakes. I never thought of an earthquake. And I was shocked to hear this. Back in 1964, Niigata was hit by a very strong earthquake and ground liquefaction happened. And anybody in Japan who learns about earthquake know this fact. But 2004 is 40 years after 1964. The institutional memory in Niigata prefecture was totally lost because all of the government workers in 1964 has already retired in 2004. After the Kobe earthquake, the Japanese government commissioned a group of scientists to identify all the possible sources of earthquakes. And the oval ones are the ocean tectonic earthquakes. And the black lines on the ground are the active faults. Especially the Miyagi-ken-oki earthquake was identified to happen within 30 years with a 99% possibility. That was a big precaution. And the earthquake came, but the scientists have told us that the magnitude will be around 8. What happened was a magnitude 9 earthquake. The energy of a magnitude 9 earthquake is 32 times stronger than magnitude 8 earthquake. So it generated an enormous tsunami, and that was the main cause of the disaster. There are so many lessons from the disaster. We have to check what went wrong. Also, we have to check what went right, because in order to invest beforehand, we have to check what was the right investments. The Japanese building codes showed its strength against the magnitude 9 earthquake. None of the office buildings in Sendai collapsed. Also, the Japanese rail, we have the Shinkansen bullet train systems. They ran on an elevated railbed, and all of the columns were reinforced before the earthquake. The city of Sendai, they were told that they will have a strong earthquake within 30 years. So the risk was imminent. So they took action. Back in 2005, together with my office in the cabinet, they organized a massive campaign for earthquake awareness. The reason is to invest for earthquake preparedness or earthquake safety. They have to submit the budget to the city council. There has to be public support for that idea. Well, thanks to these efforts, the upper picture is Kobe, the lower picture is Sendai. There's a big difference. The Kobe municipal government headquarters were destroyed, but the Sendai city office was okay. Because they made the retrofitting works before the earthquake by placing the braces and seismometers. Also, Sendai city checked the safety of all the schools of Sendai. And if necessary, they made the structural reinforcement. So not a single child was killed in Sendai school. No structural collapse of the Sendai school. Also, Sendai city checked the safety of all the fire stations. And if necessary, they made the retrofit works. So when the earthquake came, all the fire engines were able to start immediately. Of course, there was a tsunami warning. And 3 minutes after the earthquake, a big tsunami warning was issued. The junior high school students, together with the nearby elementary school pupils, they ran to the high ground because they were taught about tsunami evacuation. A massive evacuation was done. Approximately 500,000 people were in the inundated areas when the earthquake came. Most of them escaped, but 20,000 did not make it. The mortality rate of the Indian Ocean tsunami was 40% of the inundated areas. The mortality rate in the case of the 2011 is 4%. And this difference comes from whether that area is prepared for a tsunami or not. But regardless of these, there was one village in Iwate, which name is Fudai. And this village was destroyed by 2 previous tsunamis. And at one time, a mayor said that he would not want to see his people killed again in tsunamis. So he proposed to construct a big reinforced concrete water gate in the main river of the village so that it would protect the villages from future tsunamis. When he proposed this idea, he was criticized for crazy. Such ugly reinforced concrete structure, it's so expensive, but he fought for it. So when the earthquake and the tsunami came, this water gate repelled the tsunami. All the villages inside was safe. There is the city of Rikuzen Takata nearby. They had a beautiful pine tree belt along the seashore to protect the city from storm surges. When the tsunami came, all the pine trees except one was washed away. In the city, 2,000 people were killed, and that's the reality. I'm sure you have heard the idea of nature-based solutions for disaster risk reduction or ecosystem-based solutions. But I just want to tell you, don't be tricked by these ideas if your family's life is at stake, because there's no nature-based solutions against tornadoes, nothing against earthquakes, nothing against volcanic pyroclastic flows. That's the reality. You cannot save lives by wishful thinking. There's always a pitfall in human response. Human beings always underestimate the actual risk that they face. Now, the question is, how can we motivate individuals to take preventive action? Usually, you see the news of a disaster through TV or maybe nowadays YouTube. It's distant from you. You don't think that it's a story far away from you. It's not you. But this poster says that disasters may be right next to you. So because I heard that strange idea from the Niigata Prefecture director, I thought that there has to be a new method to raise awareness. And this is the Ichinichimae project. Ichinichimae in Japan means the day before. And what we do is that we interview people who were directly affected by a disaster or who have responded to a disaster by posing the question, what would you do if you're back the day before the disaster? So this is an example. This is a story of a young man who were almost starving to death because he had no food stockpiles in his house. Now, this is a tragic story. An old lady refused to evacuate when the tsunami warning was issued. her young bride-in-law, her daughter-in-law, insisted that they have to evacuate. But the old lady refused to evacuate, and she died with the young bride as her companion. What a tragedy. In Japan, the municipal mayors are the first responders. So the Cabinet Office and the Fire Defense Management Agency always organizes seminars for the mayors. But mayors are busy. And even if they come to the class, usually they sleep in the class. That's the reality. So at one time, I asked this former mayor to come to our class to share his experiences. He faced the Mount Usu volcanic eruption in 2000. And when the news that small tremors of earthquakes have started, he was drinking in a local bar, and he was not able to immediately rush to have hosted the all 3 UN conferences on disaster reduction. The latest one is the 2015 Sendai conference, which adopted the Sendai framework for disaster risk reduction. Disasters not only take lives, it takes away and if there's a repetition of economic loss, there would be no sustainable growth. So disaster reduction will enable sustainable development. Nowadays, in many of the developing countries, the urban population is growing. The newcomers, would have to live in very bad conditions, and they would be repeatedly hit by disasters. And they would lose their very small means of lives and assets. And they would be compelled to live in worse conditions. Then they would be again and again hit by disasters. Now, what does that mean? Chain of poverty, change of social unrest. Now, we have to address this issue, especially in the rapid growing metropolitan areas. Now, risk and resilience is nowadays the key for international investment decisions. Here in the Philippines, the private sector is so keen nowadays regarding disaster reduction. You can see my face there. You can see other familiar faces there. There are some elements for earthquake safety of housing. Seismology, seismic engineering. We have to have public acceptance of the value of safety. And we have to have the local masons and architects to meet these demands. Numerous efforts are necessary to save lives and livelihoods. And somebody must bundle together these efforts, and the culture of prevention must prevail to enable the work. A comprehensive inter- and transdisciplinary approach is needed. And we have another example with the Philippines. In 2004, there was a comprehensive study on earthquake risk of the Metro Manila area. And it was a joint effort by JICA and also FIBOLX and MMD and others. And that study revealed a very serious consequences if there is to be a big earthquake in Manila. And these are the outline of the results. And if you see the figures, it's terrifying. Fatality, 34,000. What would you think? That's a big event. That was back in 2004. Then another study following this was done in 2014 by involving the various offices in the Philippines. But now it's 2024. There's a need to update such study. Now, the question is, how can you convince the community leaders about disaster risk in the localities? Because the municipal mayors, they are the responsible for the localities. In Japan, we have so many monuments of the disaster. On the left is a monument of the great counter-earthquake in Tokyo. On the right is a tsunami monument in Miyako City. It's called the Tsunami Stone. And on the back of this stone, it's engraved, "Do not build houses below this elevation." This tsunami stone is put on the site of the highest tsunami inundated area. Why did our ancestors leave these historical assets for us? Because they don't want their descendants to suffer similarly. Now, in Japan, because of the massive campaign for disaster awareness, nowadays in local elections, disaster reduction ranks as the 6th priority in the local elections. So one of the aims of the public awareness campaign is to realize the local support for disaster reduction investments. And fortunately, in Japan, we have been fairly successful. Now, I will repeat, how can we take action before? By learning the past experiences and by applying the modern science. If we can imagine future tragedies, and we know that there are effective methods to solve these problems, then there would be action. A culture of prevention must prevail to encourage action for safety and resilience. So lastly, please take a look at these 3 pictures. I'm sure you all recognize the November 2013 Yolanda. March 2011, that's Great East Japan and tsunami. Can you imagine what the lowest picture is? Can anybody tell me? It's New Orleans in the United States, right after Hurricane Katrina. Philippines, Japan, and the United States. Totally different countries, different disasters, but the phenomena is the same. So we do not have to wait for all the countries to experience the same tragedies. How can we better share the lessons learned? There's a famous saying in Japan which says that natural disasters will hit us by the time people have forgotten about it. So thank you very much for your attention. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Professor Nishikawa, for your rich lecture on Japan's DRR strategies and, of course, how we can learn from history. Hopefully, this inspires us to be prepared for disasters one day ahead. Ichinichi mae. Now, I'm sure that your lecture has inspired some questions from our audience. For those who are online, please do not hesitate to leave a question for Professor Nishikawa using our QR code. Sorry. Using our QR code. Please leave or answer the QR code in the form below. Sorry. Anyway, for those who are on YouTube, you can find the link on the YouTube page. It's called Fifth JICA Lecture Q&A, bit.ly Fifth JICA Lecture Q&A. Now, given Professor Nishikawa's lecture, we would like now to hear our panelists' thoughts on his presentation and our local preparedness for disaster risk reduction. We have 2 wonderful panelists in our program today. Our first panelist is Assistant Secretary Bernardo Rafaelito Alejandro IV, Deputy Administrator for Administration and Education from the Office of Civil Defense. ASEC Alejandro has dedicated over 23 years to the OCD, where he has contributed to the development and implementation of the nation's disaster risk reduction and management strategies. He has also helped our country through the pandemic response operations during COVID-19 and through our major disaster responses during typhoons such as Yolanda, Odette, as well as volcanic eruptions and earthquakes. Without further ado, let us listen to Assistant Secretary Bernardo Alejandro.
Good afternoon, everyone. It is really a great honor for me to be here and join you in this fifth JICA lecture series. First, I'd like to acknowledge, of course, Sataro-san for your great lecture this afternoon. Your significant contributions to the field of disaster risk reduction and management has greatly contributed. Your work has paved the way for many DRRM strategies that we employ today, offering a profound understanding of disaster resilience that transcends borders. I also extend my gratitude to the Japan International Cooperation Agency for bringing us together, and to all of you, the participants, students, and of course, Padre Bobby, for your dedication to learning and enhancing global DRRM practices. Being part of this lecture is a privilege. Discussions like this are essential as they allow us to share experiences, learn from one another, and collectively strengthen our approaches to managing and reducing disaster risk. As we all know, the Philippines is highly vulnerable, just like Japan, to natural hazards. The Philippines faces an average of 20 typhoons, along with the frequent earthquakes and volcanic eruptions. These disasters take a heavy toll on our nation, socially, economically, and environmentally. They affect lives, livelihoods, and infrastructures, often setting back our development goals. This reality underscores the importance of having robust DRRM strategies in place. We must continuously learn and adapt, leveraging global best practices to enhance our resilience and ensure the safety of our communities. Japan's extensive experience in DRRM, shaped by its history of earthquakes, tsunamis, and typhoons, offer invaluable lessons for us. Understanding how Japan has developed and evolved its DRRM policies is crucial. Their journey provides us with insights that can help shape our own strategies. One of the key lessons we've learned from Japan is the importance of comprehensive infrastructure planning. It's not just about building, but about building to last. This priority aligns with the Office of Civil Defense Advocacy for Infrastructure Resilience, using materials and methods that can withstand extreme weather and climatic conditions. Regional and local counterparts play a crucial role in DRRM. Empowering local capacities and ensuring decentralization is vital for communities to effectively manage and respond to disasters, especially as first responders during crisis. Japan's Build Back Better concept is particularly noteworthy. It's not just about restoration, but about rebuilding in a way that makes communities stronger and more resilient to future disasters. Japan's DRRM strategy is structured around 4 phases: prevention mitigation, preparedness, response, and recovery or reconstruction. Japan has shifted from a reactive to a proactive stance, now emphasizing preparedness and mitigation recognizing that readiness before disaster strikes is far more effective than simply responding afterwards is a lesson that we must internalize. The 2011 Tohoku earthquake and tsunami were pivotal in driving these changes. Japan's policies and practices have evolved significantly as a result, offering a model that other nations, including the Philippines, can learn from. Collaboration between the private and public sector is vital in DRRM. Disasters don't just affect one sector, they impact all of us. Japan provides excellent examples of successful public-private partnerships. These collaborations have led to the development of early warning systems, emergency response mechanism, and resilient infrastructure projects. Private companies in Japan have played key roles, particularly in areas like disaster insurance, emergency supply chain, and technological innovations for disaster management. Pre-disaster investment is critical. It saves lives, reduces economic loss, and enables quicker recovery. In Japan, investments in earthquake-resistant buildings, flood control systems, and disaster education programs have proven effective in mitigating the impact of future disasters. The economic benefits of pre-disaster investments are clear. They result in significant cost savings by reducing damage and disruption, creating a safer environment that supports sustainable development. JICA has been instrumental in supporting pre-disaster investment measures in the Philippines. Among their notable contributions are flood control projects in various regions, including one in Cagayan de Oro, in Iloilo, and in Cavite. In Cagayan de Oro, the flood risk management project for Cagayan de Oro River was implemented to reduce flooding by constructing essential infrastructures such as dikes, flood walls, and slideways, along with non-structural measures like flood forecasting system. Similarly, in Iloilo, the Iloilo Flood Control Project significantly mitigated flooding through the construction of the Haro floodway and the improvement of the river channels in Cavite. The Cavite Industrial Area Flood Management Project has been pivotal in protecting industrial zones and surrounding communities from severe floodings through the establishment of a retarding basin, pumping stations, and floodgates. These projects exemplify the critical role that comprehensive flood management and infrastructure planning play in enhancing disaster resilience, aligning with our ongoing efforts to safeguard communities and promote sustainable development. For OCD, we are in the latter years in the implementation of the OCD JICA DRRM Capacity Enhancement Program Phase 2, wherein we have produced guidebooks to assist our local government units in formulating their enhanced local DRRM plans as primary drivers of local resilience. Moving forward, JICA is poised to launch a significant technical cooperation project aimed at substantially enhancing the disaster resilience capacity of the Greater Metro Manila Area, or the GMMA, as well as the national government agencies and local government units, specifically in the face of earthquakes and tsunamis. This upcoming initiative will also include a comprehensive update of the Metro Manila Earthquake Impact Reduction Study, MMIRS, in 2004, ensuring that the region's disaster preparedness strategies are based on the latest scientific data and global best practices. This project will not only bolster our structural defenses, but will also strengthen our community-based disaster risk management efforts, ultimately fostering a more earthquake and tsunami-resilient Metro Manila. At the core of our effort is the recognition that resilience is not just about withstanding disasters, but about cultivating a culture of resilience within our communities. It's about ensuring that every individual, family, and institution is equipped with the knowledge, tools, and mindset to face adversities head-on. This cultural shift towards resilience is critical in our journey towards sustainable development and disaster preparedness. The Office of Civil Defense and the National Disaster Risk Reduction and Management Council remain committed to continuously improve our DRRM strategies. We will keep learning from global best practices, including those from Japan. International partnerships, like our collaboration with Japan, are vital. They allow us to address shared challenges and strengthen disaster resilience together. With this being said, on behalf of the Philippines, I'd like to thank Professor Nishikawa-san for your invaluable insights. I am optimistic about our future collaboration in DRRM. And I would like to invite everyone in this forum to share your questions and thoughts during the open forum. Let us continue to learn from this very important dialogue and exchange ideas and learn from each other. So on behalf of the Philippine government, from the OCD, thank you very much and magandang hapon sa ating lahat.
Thank you very much, Professor Assistant Secretary Alejandro, for your thoughts on our local DRMM response. Our second panelist this afternoon is Professor Emma Porio. Dr. Porio is a highly cited social scientist in the Philippines and ASEAN region, known for her leadership in research consortia like GURI, Ateneo de Manila's Environment, Society, and Sustainable Development Research Cluster, and the Asian Social Wellbeing Research Consortium. She's currently leading the institutionalization of Coastal Cities at Risk Philippines, scientific findings in academia, local governments, national government agencies, civil society, and the private sector. We would like to welcome Professor Emma Porio to share her thoughts on local DRMM.
Thank you very much, Kirstine. Kirstine is my angel in fixing these things. Yeah, there it is. Thank you very much, His Excellency Endo Kasoya and Ambassador to the Philippines and the JICA officers, also to the Professor Nishikawa and ASIC Rafi Alejandro, and Dr. Norelyn Oy. Welcome back to Ateneo. He was my CRPH program manager before she went back to Japan. And to my president, Ateneo de Manila, President Roberto Siap, and my project holder of the Coastal Cities at Risk, Investing in Climate and Disaster Resilience. If you'll see there, so my discussion this afternoon is really based on the findings of the Coastal Cities at Risk Fund and our efforts to institutionalize, working with several local governments and with the National Resilience Council. The Coastal Cities at Risk project is a consortium of enter and transfer scientists and in partnership with the Manila Observatory and the National Resilience Council with funding support from the IDRC. If you look there, we have our QR codes of our websites. You're free to download them. Just acknowledge where it comes from. The bottom line, the bottom line there is all our partners. What can I say? After listening to Professor Satoru, I was overwhelmed, and I was so impressed, and I said to myself, theory, practice, science, applied in concrete realities, contextualized. What can I say? So I'm very impressed with his work, and I would say basically, can you move? Yeah. I would say that today it's really a very defining moment for me to experience a very transformative learning experience listening to Professor Nishikawa. I am very privileged this afternoon, together with the others. I feel that Professor Nishikawa has really educated us and really wake us up in terms of looking closely at our own realities and how our policies, our program designs are working or not. I have been a follower of Professor Nishikawa's work since 2018 when he spoke in the Earthquake Summit in Manila Polo Club, organized or convened by the late Ambassador Romulo and now Secretary of DNR Maria Antonia Yulorizaga. At that time, she was the president of the National Resilience Council, our private sector partner. I've also been a follower of Professor Nishikawa's Ichi Nichi Mai, the day before the disaster, method of gathering data, interviewing and looking at potential experience of potential victims and survivors. I think this is when we say contextually driven, try to get the data from the ground and up again. So I would say that the Professor Nishikawa's lecture is very timely, especially now amidst the floods in Rizal Province and Metro Manila and the impacts that we have in. So I'd say, I hope Professor Nishikawa's lecture will allow us to look at our own situation. Thank you, Professor Nishikawa, for this excellent slide. I agree with you. Mother Nature is not gentle to both Japan and the Philippines. But I will say Filipinos are not gentle with Mother Nature. Mother Nature has blessed the Philippines with many lovely beaches, coastal ecosystems that has given livelihoods to many marginalized peoples, but this has been severely degraded, also turned into resorts and the likes. So at the global scale, the World Risk Report listed the Philippines as the most at-risk nations in the world. The past few years, however, due to the pandemic and a cascading other events, I would say cascading disasters, the Philippines topped the World Risk Report for the past 2 years because of our high levels of vulnerability, lack of coping and adaptive capacities. I think we really have to focus on it. If you look at the 2019 World Risk Report, you will see that the Philippines, along with Japan, was the most highly exposed. But when you look at the most vulnerable, it's not one of the most vulnerable. And then when you look at the World Risk Index in 2019, Philippines was still there in number 3, and you cannot find Japan. It was already number 17. I always tell my students, so what made the difference? It is the investments in resilience building every day. I would like to locate my humble response to Professor Satoru's excellent presentation with the following arguments. Development, number 1, development increases climate and disaster risk. as well as the impacts to already highly exposed and vulnerable communities, social and physical infrastructures, economy, livelihoods, and associated ecosystems. Number two, the demands for economic and commercial industrial expansion, especially in rapidly urbanizing cities of the global south like Manila, Bangkok, and Mumbai and Asia, have led compromises in infrastructure development and access to basic services. I would say that the challenges, challenges to community resilience provide opportunities also for building sustainable investments and growth. I would like to say we have to look at the opportunities that are facing now. For example, the flooding we're experiencing now, we should have said, what should have been done years ago? What should have been done days before? And all that, I'll tell you later. I always say, how do we frame the problematic? Climate, environment, economic development, and urban transformation. During the last 2 decades, there has been doubling of disasters, and in the process, exacerbating the inequalities within and between countries and cities of the global north and the global south. With those contributing least to greenhouse gas emissions, farmers, fishers are experiencing the worst impacts of climate impact drivers like typhoons, sea level rise, and the like. Number two, I'd like to say that in doing inter and transdisciplinary action research and in applying it institutionally, we have to be, number one, we have to naturalize the social sciences. And we had, as what Professor Nishikawa is doing in Tohoku University, socializing and humanizing the natural systems and be problem-focused, solutions-driven with the systems lens. I would say that this is in an inter and transdisciplinary research and action application. This we have to really appreciate, and it means working together, collaborating together. When I was leading a team of 15 scientists, I always say, by being together, we can be more. But to innovate is to collaborate. But to collaborate together, we have to navigate the systems that we are in. This is if you see there in the figure, they're saying that the important factors really in socioeconomic development and environmental challenges is number one, governance. Second is food production. Third is water risk, drought risk, and natural hazards. I think this is very important. I always say that here in the Philippines, our imaginary is either we have too much water, we have flooding, or too little, we have drought. So we have to look at our planning, our development strategies within this context. This is the Metro Manila Cebu climate vulnerability map. We have to prepare the intensification of climate disasters with ongoing and future scenarios in mind, like extreme flooding, rising heat index, rising seas, sinking islands. Slow onset events like sea level rise, subsidence, and flooding interact and make the impacts of coastal communities and vulnerabilities worse. For example, the drawing of too much groundwater in Manila, in Cebu, and other cities have led to subsidence, and in the process, increasing the effects of coastal inundation. Metro Manila socioeconomic profile make us more vulnerable to the climate and disaster risk, with Mega Manila population 25 million, informality 40 to 60%, population density in Mega Manila is 20 million, but in Baseco and Tondo, it is 41,000 per square kilometer, the most dense in the world. If the big one hits, can you imagine the damage and losses to the high infrastructure and to the other damage? This is the Metro Manila's shifting patterns of informality and vulnerability from 1997, 2000, 2010, and 2018. As you can see, both for informal settlements, mixed settlements have dispersed all over the settlements and the metropolis. Where are we? I got this from the Myers. Secretary Renato Celedon during the Ecology Awareness Week shared that there are 90 destructive earthquakes for the past 400 years and 40 tsunamis for the past 400 days, indicating epicenters like that. So Professor Nishikawa has outlined what the challenges that we face if the big one happens. I like very much the Professor Nishikawa's how do we reduce potential impacts of climate and disaster risk. 4 phases of disaster reduction is excellent, with pre-disaster prevention, mitigation, preparation, and post-disaster response and recovery. I would say we have to bridge science, policy, practice nexus by co-generating knowledge with stakeholders like Professor Nishikawa, gathering data on the ground. We must also co-create the capacities of scientists, professionals, and practitioners that would lead into co-ownership and co-benefits. We do this by inserting our science and technologies into local planning and development through integrated and climate disaster risk assessment that will update the local climate action plan, update the city land use plan, the annual investment plan, and finally on the ground, the policies, programs, and activities on the LGUs. Our job as scientists and professionals is to produce science-informed, gender-sensitive, and social inclusive resilience funds for CIDRA-informed public investments through public-private people partnerships. The hazard map here from the 2004 earthquake Myers study, I would say that when the big one strikes Manila, the impact scenario projects, as Professor Nishikawa said, 34,000 will die. But really, it's also projected to split into 4 quadrants. So where should we get our water, food, medicines for the first 24 hours? If Manila will be separated from Quezon City, Makati from Quezon City, we have to think about Professor Nishikawa's 4 phases of disaster risk prevention. It's really excellent model and guide for us to be science-based, to be risk-informed, to be resilience-driven in our policy and planning and development. This is our response in the coastal cities at risk. We believe that we have to develop anticipatory technologies for climate and disaster resilience. We have to integrate all the technologies for resilience hub design. My lesson in Odette, the Cebu, the richest province in the Philippines, after 3 days, no food line, 3 lines, food lines, water lines, and energy lines. So that's why the anticipatory, our resilience hub is anchored on food. We have, aquaponics, energy, solar panel, water. We have solar power, potable water system, and then plus C, communication, okay? I don't have much time, but I'd like to conclude by saying the problem is so huge and beyond us that our only saving grace is to collaborate in producing science-based, risk-informed, resilience-driven policy, planning and development tools, strategies, and programs, and make it the blueprint for action. All local governments submit climate and disaster reduction. But it's really the blueprint for action that should be. So I would say that number 2, I'd say we urgently need to bridge science, policy, practice nexus to inform synergistically our initiatives at the micro, meso, and macro levels and finding our own nexus of climate action. Our mantra at the National Council and the Coastal Cities at Risk is that we must collaborate. It's our only saving grace. We must craft an effective strategic climate disaster resilience frameworks based on really preparing, adapt, and transform. I always say we have to have the risk assessment, but we must also communicate the risk. A lot of the SIDRA and a lot of the plannings are sitting there in the local planning office, and I think we have to connect. That's why at the National Resilience Council, we create resilience workshops with the local governments, with the private sector, and with the communities. We tell the private sector that you cannot have business continuity if you do not invest in the resilience of the communities and the people. So all of us must work together. So collaborate, we have to collaborate together. Resilience is everybody's work, and resilience is everybody's persistence, everyday work, and the habitus, I say, of the French sociologist Pierre Bourdieu said, habitus. We have to work every day, imbibe, and collaborate. I would like to thank the men and women of the Coastal Cities at Risk. We have Father Bobby Yap as our current project holder, and you can see earlier our partners with Secretary Lois Saga and our international advisors, and I'd like to thank them because without this, we could not have all these partnerships with the local governments. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Dr. Porio. Ma'am, you may join the panel. Now, we would like to hear Professor Nishikawa's thoughts on the matter. Professor Nishikawa, please share with us your comments on our panelists today. Professor Nishikawa, you may use the. Sorry.
Okay, so, well, I really would like to appreciate the two discussants' comments, especially the need for action, especially transdisciplinary action, and also the policy-science nexus. In order to address the impressive impacts, especially of not only of the climate change, but the socio-economic development factor, we have to have concrete action. And to do that, a good dialogue and good connection between the science and policy and action is really necessary. I'll stop here. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Professor Nishikawa, for your comments. Now, before I open the forum, I would like to acknowledge the different universities who are present in this forum, online and on-site, from students, faculty, and staff from Ateneo de Manila University, Far Eastern University, University of the Philippines, De La Salle University, Lyceum of the Philippines, Xavier University, Polytechnic University, University of Santo Tomas Marianos, Marcos State University, and Mindanao Koksai Daigaku. We would also like to acknowledge the different research groups, think tanks, government and foreign offices, and media outlets who are present today. Everyone's presence in this lecture speaks of our community's passion to find transnational, translocal, and intersectional solutions to disaster management. We truly appreciate your presence in joining our lecture. Now, the Q&A forum has been quite busy, and we would now like to open the floor for questions from our participants online and on-site. For those who are on-site, please feel free to stand before a microphone if you would like to raise questions. But in the meantime, I will read some questions that we have received online. One of our big questions, and definitely one of the great concerns, is that of the lessons that we have learned from Professor Nishikawa's lecture. Now, there are people or there are students who are asking, for our panelists, what do you think, sorry. especially given what just happened recently. No? The recent tropical storm Enteng, or also known as Yagi, have caused continuous heavy rainfalls that cause floodings and class suspensions in the National Capital Region. Fortunately for Quezon City, we are, weatherproof, I guess, according to our mayor, and did not cancel classes, but nonetheless, it was still a challenge for many to go to their classes today. The question of this student is, what are the best practices of Japan in terms of disaster prevention, aside from the floodway projects that were mentioned earlier by Professor Nishikawa, that should be adopted in the NCR or in the Philippines to enhance its resiliency and preparedness against frequent tropical storms? This is a question open for the entire panel.
Thank you. For the government, we really need to come up, or not come up. We have several flood mitigation projects, but what we really need is to have a very comprehensive flood projects to be implemented in Metro Manila, because there are 17 local government units in Metro Manila. These are highly urbanized local government units, independent from one another, and the challenge really is how to have a very comprehensive plan, integrated. So that is the challenge for not just for our MMDA, but DPWH as well. And JICA has been helping us a lot on that aspect. They have been very involved in coming up, or in fact, we have several projects within Metro Manila. But of course, through the years, Metro Manila has changed. There are a lot of new infrastructure projects that we have to consider, and plenty of developments ongoing. So we really need to have a robust, a very comprehensive plan that really works.
After Ondoy or Kichana, there was an alliance of 7 LGUs in the Marikina watershed, because floods, earthquakes do not recognize political administrative boundaries. Ecological or transboundary issues have to be settled. So there are several networks, like for example, in terms of the basura, the plastic, the transboundary issues, and whose, basura is this like that. So in terms of that, there are existing, and now with the Rizal floods, I think Lenny, the DNR, has a project Transform that puts together several municipalities and cities, because climate and disaster risks are not located, it's really transboundary issues. So these are all, under the initiatives of the public-private partnerships now.
Professor Nishikawa, would you like to answer?
Yes, and also I would like to emphasize the importance of the public acceptance of the risk. The natural phenomena is always there, but on the other side, there is population growth. Now, everybody has to recognize it has to be reflected on every people's, I would say, action and attitudes. Yeah, I think you know the English expression, there's no free lunch. At the same time, I would like to emphasize, there's no free safety. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Professor Nishikawa.
Can I follow that?
Oh, sure.
I always tell people, nothing is free in life. You either pay it with your money, with your body, or your soul, or a combination of those. I would say that, we really have to emphasize about preparation and engagement and involving everybody. preparation, everybody must prepare. After Kitsana, some of the Manila Observatory scientists, together with Professor Andrew Siringan at MSI, went through from Pasig, Marikina, all the way down to Manila Bay to see what's really clogging the waterway. Their finding was 70% of those that clogging were permitted structures. That's why I always say, nagka-disaster ka kasi you're on the way. You're not supposed to build there. We are a flood basin, so it collects the water. My students is that, a disaster happens because you're on the way of the hazard. So get out of the way of the hazard. So I always tell when I'm lecturing with local government units, I said, we have to see what is our role in creating the clogging, the flooding, and how our permits are instruments supposedly of, a prevention mitigation instrument. So I would say that, again, we emphasize collaboration, integration, appreciation, and respect for each other's work and how we can work together better. We always say, bounce forward together.
Right. Thank you, Dr. Porio. Do we have any questions from the floor? Yes, please. Lead it back.
Hello, everyone, to our esteemed panel. So I am Dane Tirabang. I work for the Palawan Provincial Disaster Risk Reduction and Management Office. And I would say in my early in my career, I am a geoscientist. So early in my career, I feel so blessed to heard really Professor Nishikawa's talk. And I think we should really learn, us in the provincial government really would love, or we should learn, or we should hear, everyone in the government should hear this talk. So what I want to say also is that in the local government unit in the provinces, the context is very different from here in Metro Manila. We lack a lot of technical know-hows. And also, one thing that I would like to affirm also is what Dr. Emma has said, that social sciences need to be in the conversation. I am a geologist, so I have been working in the technical field for so long, and DRR has been a realm for physical scientists for a very long time. So it's really a high time to involve more humanities in this conversation. But my question is, transdisciplinary action, we really agree that this is the way for DRR. It's, but I think it is very much easier said than done, and it's an entire field on its own. So my question is, given the huge problem, what do you think are the points that we should pivot, or what are the points that we should press so that we could achieve this transdisciplinary action that we would want for sustainable development and disaster risk reduction? Thank you.
Start with what I said. Nature has not been gentle to Philippines, but we Filipinos have not been gentle, nurturing the basic sources of our life: water, forests, mountains, and the like. So I would say first, basically what Professor Nishikawa says, awareness, embrace, accept the reality, face it, find out, like the hazard hunter of Juris Portal, put your address. Where's the earthquake fault? How far is your house? You have to be aware. How far are you from flooding? The hazard hunter of Juris Portal they will tell you. So everyone, we have to see what context we are in and what we should do, rather than just covering our eyes, burying our head under the sun, which I think we should cure ourselves. So it's in everyone's mind, heart, and body to be aware and to act and to prepare. Constructing safety zone is a collective work. Resilience is a collective work. Okay?
Any other comments from the panelists?
Yeah, just to add, no, it's really about understanding the risk and understanding the hazard, no? And putting action or put into action things that we need to do to mitigate, no? Because the Philippines, just like Japan, we are in an area where we cannot avoid these hazards, but we can do something about it, no? So yes, I agree, there should be awareness, acceptance, understanding, and of course, putting it into action.
I would say you have the tools. In my teaching Master of Disaster Risk and Resilience for the past 5 years, so many people do not know that there is Hazard Hunter, and that all you have to do is put your address, and it will tell you what are the hazards in your place, and who is exposed, what is exposed, and how you can perhaps reduce your vulnerability and exposure. Number one, what Professor Nishikawa says, retrofit. I always say, what are the structural and non-structural measures of adaptation? So I think no amount, even my students, no amount of lecturing will, until you yourself will accept. I always say, we Filipinos are here in the ring of fire. We're in the middle of the Pacific Ocean, and we'll always have typhoons, and now with development, the sea level, the rising seas, we're sinking 3 times faster than global average. We have to accept and embrace our reality and be bold and courageous enough to say, I want to have a life that is resilient. I want that I will be alive when the earthquake hits. I want, as in Japan, I was very struck that the leader, he didn't want his ancestors to die. So we have to make that decision, that we don't want our children to die. Also, we should look at our consumption patterns. I always say, at the rate we are consuming and extracting from the Earth's resources, we need 3 planets to sustain our lifestyle. So everyone, change your perspective. Understand the risk that is facing in your life, in your place. Where is your house standing? How, I like the one that in Professor Nishikawa, there is, every building has a profile. I'm really impressed. I told myself, we still light years away. So, but I think it starts with everyone recognizing that we have a shared future. If there's a shared prosperity, there's a shared disaster that we are constructing. So we have a choice of really, taking the fate, our own fates, and deciding that you will be part of the solution. We are part of the problem, so we are part of the solution and the construction of a resilient, sustainable city, community, and family is in all our hands together.
Yes. Thank you. Professor Nishikawa, would you have your thoughts?
Yes. It's really to make everybody, the partners, the stakeholders, recognize that it's their business, not somebody else's business. And that is the starting point for sharing the knowledge and sharing action. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Professor Nishikawa. Actually, there is another question specific for Professor Nishikawa from our online participants. What disaster risk reduction technology and protocols do you think the Philippines can benefit from but have yet to implement?
Yes, especially because Philippines is an earthquake country, there would be more, I would say, room for introducing, for example, seismic base isolation technologies or real-time earthquake early warning systems or other automated systems. And it's not just technology, it's how the society accepts such technologies. Thank you.
Thank you. We'd like to call for the next question here inside. Yes, please.
Hello, good afternoon. I'm Leon from Lyceum of the Philippines University, a second-year student from the College of International Relations. Before I ask my question, I would like to thank Professor Nishikawa for a very wonderful talk on disaster and risk reduction management. Any one of our esteemed speakers can answer the question. The question is, what strategies can be employed to ensure that disaster risk reduction and management plans are inclusive and consider vulnerable populations? Thank you very much.
Participatory action research, participatory community risk assessment. We all have that. The thing is really we have to practice it. Inclusion is an everyday attitude. So we have all, I think, we're a leader in participatory development. So social, including those who are there in the margins, it's a challenge when you look at the local climate action planning and updating the land use plans and the like. We still have to, when I say walk the talk, I think you know what I'm talking about. I think you know the answer yourself. And I really think that I would challenge Ateneans especially and students. We think we have a participatory democracy and all that stuff, but really in real day-to-day life of planning and conceptualizing what should be the strategies, we still have a long way to go. Okay.
Yeah, for me, it's really about putting into action what we have in our plans. We have been doing participatory planning, participatory contingency planning at the grassroots, at all levels, strategic, tactical, barangay training, but putting into action these things that we teach them, that we plan, is very important. And it's still a challenge for all of us. So for me, that's it, putting into action what we plan to do. And of course, practice what we intend or what we plan to do.
Yes, I would like to emphasize that we have to appreciate the value of safety, value of risk reduction. Because, for example, let's look at the health sector. Everybody is now concerned about health because we have experienced COVID, but at the same time, if we can be more sensitive about safety and appreciate the value of safety, there would be more, I would say, preventive investments, not only by the governmental sector, but even at the household level or at the businesses. Thank you.
All right. We have another interesting question from our online respondents. They're really quite active sending their questions online. So this is for our panelists. For young people, what is your advice to them on how to promote disaster prevention so that they could implement it in their community and peers? Since we have a good number of students here, what do you think you can advise to young people?
Participate. I will say, we just finished a conference with the theme, anticipate, innovate, and participate. So look at your barangay disaster management plan. we in National Resilience Council, we have the bingo barangay scorecards. We also have the city score. But I find that the SK, that's the youth sector, I think we students, faculty, we're so busy, all of us are so busy with our work that we just leave the work of the RRM to the barangay council, the city council. No. CCA, climate change adaptation, disaster risk reduction is everybody's work. The government creates the enabling context, but it has to have participation from all of us. From the private sector, you should be able to say, where should they invest in order to reduce the exposure and vulnerability of the people here? So it's for the young, there's a big in the UN now, the youth climate action. And in fact, at the National Resilience Council, we're giving resilience awards specific to the youth, because whatever you do will be a defining moment, really. The youth constitutes more than half of our population. So that's a very important, critical force. So anticipate and innovate and know also practical things. Are you located near earthquake fault? What has been the history of that? Are you like, for example, we are partnered with Baguio. I asked them, where were the landslides in the 1990 earthquake? Where are the sinkholes? Because, but I find my students, I'm talking about students, that you have to point out that observe, know the science, know the risk profile of your space, place, and community and society, okay? So understand the risk personally, familially, community-wide, okay? And the tools are there. I find that, there are many tools that the government have, like, for example, the Listo manual of the DILG, there's Listo Familia, Listo Comunidad. So the tools are there. So let's work together, okay?
Right, thank you. Assistant Secretary, would you have some thoughts for...
Yes. The same, no? I'd like the youth to really participate, not just become a mere observer in DRR. Let's put your energy where it matters, no? Huwag niyo ubusin sa TikTok. So it's really about your participation, contribution, no? And of course, providing leadership in your respective communities.
But I think what is really also important is for the older generation to appreciate that by partnering with the young, with energy, insight, innovation, you can test also the tried old methods that the older. So we really have to work together. It cannot, I think we have to incentivize each other to hold our hands together, because this is our life. We are here. Okay?
Professor?
Yes, I just like to toss one idea for the young generation. Try to interview your grandmother or grandfather whether there was a disaster in your locality when your grandfather or grandmother was young. Because for example, let me raise one question. How many of you have heard about the Mount Pinatubo eruption in 1991? That was an enormous disaster. But I fear that the memories are fading, and we must not fade the memory. Thank you.
After Yolanda, I remember the Japanese saying, to forget is a disaster. When I was interviewing people in Eastern Samar right after Yolanda, 3 of my respondents said their grandmothers and grandfathers survived the 2012 storm surge by holding on top of the coconut. Then I said, and they call it dose. 2012. 12 means dozen, 12. So I asked her, why don't you remember? Because she was telling me that the day before Yolanda, the water receded. And I said, why didn't you connect that? He says, because the way it was told by their grandparents, it's like, it happens a long time ago and it will not happen again. And I told her, nature works in rhythmic patterns. So our DNA for disaster risk reduction must have that history, memory, identity. But they will not tell you unless you ask them. So Professor Nishikawa's idea is very good. Know your history of hazards in your place and what happened to these people. Sex Solidum has a book on the history of earthquakes since the time of Magellan. How many of you know that such thing? So we have to know ourselves. We have to know our history of disasters and know how shall we change our responses. I always tell my students, we're like Nero playing the fiddle while Rome is burning, or Sisyphus. When they push the rock up, and then when the typhoon comes down, and then push the rock up again. 20 typhoons hit our shores. How come our response have not changed?
All right, thank you. One last question from our on-site. Yes, please.
Hello everyone, my name is Ben and I'm from the Lyceum of the Philippines University, also a CIR student. And I think my question would be for Professor Ishikawa. As you mentioned earlier in your slides, is that the Philippines continues to be highly urbanized and developed. And as we do that, we see a less focus on making sure that we have the right mechanisms to ensure that we prevent disasters from happening, or at least minimize it. With Japan's experience, how would you strike a balance with the rapid expansion and making sure that we have the right mechanism in place to minimize the effects of disaster? Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Well, I would like to emphasize that now we can, I would say, predict and model possible future disasters. So we can do decent risk assessment with our latest knowledge, and how to really utilize the results of such risk assessment is the key. And I really would like to encourage the young scientists to tackle this agenda. Thank you.
I would support that. Did you see what Professor Nishikawa did with the manga? I challenge all the young people. What kinds of tech talks or comics or IEC materials that you will produce that will really makaantig sa puso and will make people act. Okay? People are tired of, the usual. So I challenge you. Be the change you want to be.
Okay, thank you. And I guess to end, or at least the last online question that we have, there are actually a lot of questions, but we are running out of time, unfortunately. But one important question, we actually have quite a number of questions from the NAPOCOR organization. What is the specific action of JICA and Philippine government in updating the Myers 2004? This year, or is it going to happen in the coming years? Are there plans to update the Myers?
Yes, there is a plan to update the Myers with JICA. So we already submitted our formal request. It's up for approval, and hopefully we can move forward with updating the Myers by next year. So it's a long process, but we will do it with JICA. It will already be expanded to include the greater Manila area, meaning Cavite, Bulacan, because the old study was on Metro Manila only.
Okay. Thank you very much. And I think the Myers can also set the tone for future studies and the other areas here in the Philippines. On that note, I would like to thank our speakers, panelists, and participants for an engaging discussion this afternoon. We have recorded your questions and we can forward them to the necessary speakers and they can respond to you if you have left your contacts. Now, in relation to this discussion, we would now like to call the Chief Representative of JICA, Mr. Takema Sakamoto, for his closing remarks for this wonderful afternoon.
Thank you, MC. President of ADMU Father Robert Yap, Professor of Department of Sociology and Anthropology, Dr. Emma Horio, Director of Japanese Studies Program, Dr. Christine Santos, and ASEC of DNR, Dr. Noraline Wee, Deputy Administrator of OCD, ASEC Bernardo Alejandro, Ambassador of Japan to the Philippines, Endo Kazuya, His Excellency, and no less than Professor Nishikaya Satoru, actually my colleague from JICA as a special advisor, Professor of the Tohoku University, and all participants from various government agencies and universities. Magandang hapon po sa inyo lahat. Konnichiwa. It's my great pleasure to join you all today for the 5th JICA Chair Lecture. Despite today's bad weather, I'm very happy to be with you. And thank you very much, ADMU, for your facilitation. I believe that our topic today, disaster risk reduction and resilience, is very relevant and timely, of course. Last July, Typhoon Karina has caused heavy flooding in many areas, and many families were affected, and properties were damaged seriously. And sooner or later, a disastrous earthquake, the big one, might occur. And of course, as you know, Japan and the Philippines are both disaster-prone countries. And the discussions today provided an important opportunity to reflect and learn from each other DRR experiences and lessons learned. Let me sum up and re-emphasize the three major takeaways, I believe, from today's discussions. First, pre-disaster or prior investment is critically helpful. Japanese experiences have already showed that pre-disaster investment in both structural and non-structural fields reduced the damage caused by disasters. Such prior investments can limit the amount of necessary expenditures on rehabilitation and reconstruction compared to the absence of such investments. United Nations report also pointed out that $1 prior investment can save 15 US future costs. This is the first point. And second, awareness raising and education campaigns are crucial. DRR is not the responsibility of government alone, but everyone should make efforts to contribute to or align with the measures by the government. The panelists, resource persons, everybody says, no free lunch, no free safe. Let's start from the simple action, such as disposing our garbage properly, so that we can avoid the clogging of drainages and waterways. Preparing evacuation bags that we can immediately grab when necessary. And checking hazard maps in advance for safer evacuation. share our knowledge with each other, what to do and not to do, with the sense of bayanihan. Support each other, help each other. And third, early warning and follow-up are the key. Timely and accurate information on disaster risks enables rapid and proper response. In addition to the serious preparedness actions by people, communities, and national and local governments, early and appropriate information sharing can prevent the loss of lives and economic damages. Until now, JICA has been working very closely with the Philippine government and communities for over 5 decades in making the country more resilient to natural disasters. We have been jointly tackling challenges in wide-ranging areas such as resilient infrastructure, flood control, and monitoring forecast and early warning of earthquakes, volcanoes, and extreme weather conditions. Based on our long journey today, I also stress that it is important to address these challenges both in soft and hard components. Actually, JICA has been working with various government agencies and communities, as I told you, even from the preparedness phase toward disaster resilient society. To name a few: one, construction or refurbishment of flood control facilities. Two, development of radar and monitoring stations for accurate early warning and forecasting. Three, uplift of the awareness through education campaigns. Four, enhancement of human resources and institutional capacities through our JICA's training courses and scholarship programs, and dispatch of JICA's experts and volunteers. Five, provision of emergency relief assistance, such as Japan Disaster Relief Team, emergency relief goods, quick impact projects, and budget support. Moreover, we recently launched a new unique technical cooperation project with GSIS, which aims to enhance resilient insurance system. As shown in Professor Nishikawa's lecture today, DRR projects evolve. DRR policies evolve. And government should always revisit and reevaluate if the policies and measures have been efficient and or effective. There is no one-size-fits-all approach. Therefore, it should always be adaptable to the local context. And lessons learned should always be revisited and reflected. In addition, the whole government joint collaboration, in other words, interagency collaboration or coordination, is really crucial. In addition to OECD, PAGASA, FIVORKS, and DPWH, the role of other governmental agencies such as DNR, DOH, DSWD, and LGUs, and also local communities are equally important when it comes to DRR. As you know now, the Philippine government will host the Asia-Pacific Ministerial Conference on DRR this coming October in Manila. Taking this opportunity, JICA is honored and ready to share good practices and lessons learned. JICA is really willing to contribute to the resilient society for all of you and for the future generations. JICA is always with you and supports your initiatives. Kasama nyo kami, sama-sama tayo. Through today's JICA Chair's Lecture, I hope that everyone has now broader and eye-opening understanding on DRR. And now, as you know how our two countries can learn from each other's valuable experiences and wisdoms to address common challenge together. In this sense, I wish that you could enjoy a productive and dynamic exchange of ideas today, and we sincerely hope to share more of Japan's development experiences and broader discussion in various fields in the future lecture series. Thank you very much for your kind attention. Maraming salamat po at mabuhay. Good afternoon to all of you.
Thank you very much, Mr. Sakamoto, for those wonderful remarks. Once again, we would like to thank everyone for the afternoon. As a sign of appreciation for their expertise and knowledge, we would like to present a couple of tokens for our guests this afternoon. First, we have a couple of tokens from JICA and also from Japanese Studies. And I guess on that note, to commemorate our event, we would like to invite our speakers and panelists for a group photo with Mr. Sakamoto. Let's just have one more.
Before that, I have another talk for you.
Thank you very much.
Thank you very much for your patience.
Thank you as well. All right, on that note, we'd like to invite everyone for another photo here up front. And then, of course, we would like to, since we're not a lot, we would like to also invite the audience perhaps to join us for one quick photo as well. Okay. Okay, thank you. And on that note, we would like to thank everyone for attending this event. We will be uploading the video and we'll be posting photos related to the event online at the Ateneo page. But for future JICA lectures and for other JICA events, please follow JICA Philippines on Facebook. And for Japan-related events that are hosted here in Ateneo, please follow the Ateneo JSP page. On that note, we would like to thank everyone for joining us online. Maraming salamat po. Please take care and stay safe this evening. Thank you, everyone. Good night. Thank you.